Hello, and welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. This is going to be a Crazy 8 episode of the extended Iceberg series. I did not include this one in the original Iceberg, so it's kind of brand new, and it's basically the yes man theory of macroeconomics. I think I maybe came up with that term myself, but this is not my original idea. There's several other thinkers who've had a similar view on macroeconomics. But basically the idea that a lot of macroeconomics, particularly modern macroeconomics, is really just a scientific and semi-quantifiable explanation to justify any political decisions on economic policy. The reason why this exists is because there's an inherent conflict of interest between the economics profession and the political sphere. Governments, universities, either directly or indirectly hire the majority of economists, whether it's working at those institutions directly or indirectly through think tanks, consulting firms, or NGOs that rely on government funding to be viable. And because of this, you rarely hear about heterodox economists who break the conventional model, whatever the governments of their country or the political forces that need to promote a certain fiscal or monetary policy want them to say. I've named two examples of this in the United States, but this is not just an American thing. It's a global phenomenon, and it's probably worse in countries that have less independent monetary policies. But the two examples that come to my mind are monetarist SupplySide Economics in the late 70s and early 1980s for the Republicans, and MMT for the modern Democratic Party. But let's start for the example of SupplySide Economics. Milton Friedman and Arthur Lather became notable economists mainly because of their backing of supply side and monetarist economics, and the reason why those gained so much traction is because then candidate Ronald Reagan needed to justify his plan to boost defense spending and cut taxes without cutting entitlement spending in a material way and without triggering the fears of the electorate and saying, hey, this actually can be a way to boost economic growth. And so if you need a positive explanation to have a tax cut driven deficit spending, then you have supply side economics as the rationale for that. And now that since the political winds are kind of against tax cuts, all this now supply side economics is discredited. Well, it really doesn't discredit, it's just no longer politically useful because neither party is really serious about cutting taxes in a material enough of a way to do what the supply siders would endorse. And also the monetarist idea of just using monetary policy as stimulus has become just so universal now that you don't really need a Milton Friedman to advocate for it anymore. And then on the other side, you have MMT. Like Stephanie Kelton was an obscure economist at Stony Brook University prior to her adoption of MMT, and even after, until MMT became popular because progressive politicians in the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party needed a way to justify their increased demands of social spending and their increases on taxes that would not spell disaster for the economy, because conventional neoclassical economics at the time, or even some forms of Keynesianism, would say that that would not be an ideal economic policy. In fact, probably adverse side effects that would dominate and outweigh the benefits of it. But now all come along comes MMT, and it now you have a justification for pursuing the economic policies that then candidate Bernie Sanders would have wanted. And then the Austrians, the same thing. It's Austrian economics was kind of an economic backwater, heterodox theory for most of its history, and it gained popularity with the popularity of libertarianism, because the Austrian School of Economics, their policy solutions is essentially free market libertarian style economics and hard money, which is a very libertarian idea. So basically what I'm saying is that the economists that become noteworthy in macroeconomics and the theories that become noteworthy in macroeconomics and that become the basis of financial analysis are more often than not based on which economist can supply the theory that justifies the political needs of fiscal policy, whether it's from the incumbent government needing to go a different path, as in the case of SupplySide Economics, or it's from challengers who want to justify what is a more, I would say, humanitarian or social cause, but have an economic framework to make it seem less crazy or radical, as in the case, say, of either Austrian economics on the right or Bernie Sanders style socialism on the left. So my conclusion is that that's why you also see that microeconomics, a lot of the rules are fairly consistent, but when you move up to the macro level, all of a sudden a lot of the rules of microeconomics do not apply. And they'll say, oh, just because the scale of governments and businesses that have different rules than the individual purchaser, the aggregate, doesn't necessarily behave the same way as an individual or small business or a local industry. But I think it's more just because macroeconomics is so politically driven and dependent for its survival as a field that the profession unintentionally bends to the political needs, and those economists who suit the government's ideas of how fiscal monetary policy should operate tend to be the ones who gain the most traction in terms of fame and economic social credibility and prestige and all of that jazz. So that's my thoughts. I call it the yes man theory of macroeconomics. Really, it's just kind of a 3/4 baked theory I have on the idea of why the popular macroeconomic trends in terms of academic theories and ideas for policy always happen to line up with the rise of certain ideologies or political candidates who need the very type of policy that economists advocate in order to get their campaign promises done. If you like this and other episodes of this show, please like and subscribe. And you can also ask questions by emailing us at askafundmanager@gmail.com. Have a great rest of your week in the markets.